Who is Allah offering a ransom to in this passage?
Abraham.
So Allah is committing idolatry?
No, why?
So what does Allah owe to Abraham?
No, but the story goes, if I remember, the story goes that Abraham is asked to sacrifice his son.
To who?
To Allah.
Right.
I don't know if it's to Allah. I know it's definitely a sacrifice that God demands of him.
Would it be to anyone other than Allah? Would Allah ask Abraham to sacrifice to any other than Allah?
No, he wouldn't. But I don't know if it was to. But it was. I know that something was demanded of Abraham.
It was a dream.
Huh?
It wasn't asked. It was a dream.
In a dream. Yeah. True.
So he didn't do it. He never took his child to the hill.
No, he did.
There we go.
The action happened.
Yes.
So in the dream, Abraham kept seeing that, and then he consulted with his son, and then his son told him, if you've been told by your Lord, then you have to obey.
So my question is, now we both agree that a ransom is when a third party requires something of you and you pay the ransom for someone else. Mm-hmm. Yeah? That's what a ransom is. My question is, who is Allah ransoming to in this passage?
So basically, from what I understand, the story goes then that Abraham, just when he's about to do the act, the animal appears.
Yes.
That was the ransom.
That was the sacrifice, yes. That was the ransom. You're totally right.
Yeah, so God replaced.
And I agree.
Yeah.
I'm not disputing that. We've got the same story in Genesis. We believe in exactly the same thing. But my question is, again, who is the ransom to? What is a ransom again? Tell me what a ransom is again.
In Surah As-Safat, verse 107, the Qur'an uses the word fadainahu, which means we ransomed him. This word is based on the root letters fa, dal, and ya, a pattern familiar in Qur'anic Arabic. It doesn't just mean to replace, it means to offer something in exchange to save someone from punishment or death. This is not a casual exchange like swapping one item for another. It is an intentional act of ransom, one that implies there is a demand to be met and a price must be paid for someone to be set free. So the structure of this verse isn't describing a mere technical replacement. It's describing a legal and spiritual transaction. Someone was facing death, and the ransom intervened to rescue them. But here's the problem. The Qur'an never tells us who received the ransom, and that leads us straight into a serious theological dilemma within Islam. If you ask a Muslim who was the ransom paid to, you'll only find three possible answers. First, some might say the ransom was given to Abraham as a reward or substitution. But that would mean Allah gave something to satisfy a man. That directly contradicts Tawheed, which teaches that no one influences God. Why would Allah need to offer Abraham anything for obedience, as if God owed his servant a debt? Second, if they suggest the ransom was paid to some third party, like a spiritual force or a law of nature that demands blood, then they've introduced a power outside of Allah with authority over life and death. And in Islamic theology, that's shirk, associating partners with God. But the third option is the most theologically dangerous of all. If Muslims say the ransom was offered to Allah himself, then that means Allah imposed a demand and then fulfilled it himself. That's not only inconsistent within Islamic doctrine, it also sounds remarkably similar to the Christian gospel. Because in Christianity, God sees mankind trapped in sin and death. And in his mercy, he doesn't send someone else. He comes himself, not as a distant judge demanding punishment, but as the loving creator, stepping into his own creation to heal, to restore, and to redeem. Jesus said, "The Son of Man came to give his life as a ransom for many." In that light, redemption is not about satisfying wrath. It's about divine love entering the valley of death, breaking its power, and setting humanity free. This is the climax of divine love, when the author of life willingly steps into death, so that we might return to life eternal. By contrast, Islam uses the word ransom without ever explaining the logic behind it, without saying who receives it, and without providing a theological framework that supports it. This creates a black hole in Islamic theology. Muslims reject the Christian doctrine of redemption, yet the Qur'an borrows its vocabulary, without its clarity, and without its coherence.
Yeah, so like I said, ransom means, if you have a hostage or something.
Yeah.
And
it's a payment.
Yeah, a payment. Yeah.
So it's a payment from party A to party B for some reason.
Yeah.
Right? So for some reason, you pay party B because of X. Whatever X is, we can fill X with anything. Right? Party A pays party B. The Quran is saying that Allah ransoms, for the sake of argument, Ishmael. Who possibly has something over Allah that Allah needs to ransom them from? Who's party B?
I don't know. What's the Arabic term? Can someone check?
Can I read it?
Yes, of course.
The word used of
Yeah.
maybe not that.
Yeah, it might not be a good translation.
Okay, it's translated as.
Let me see the Arabic.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Which one?
Here, this passage. This is the Arabic.
07?
Yeah. Is the word ransom there?
I don't think it's a ransom. It's you are given a replacement.
A replacement.
Of like
Okay.
What's the word anyway?
And gentlemen, what is the express belief that can be backed up in the Quran or
That's what
any
we do every
hadith,
year.
right?
We do
Where
that sacrifice.
That is
Do the sacrifice.
definitely Allah that appeared to Abraham.
Sorry,
in
no
history.
offense. No, with the greatest respect, I want to prosecute my argument, and I don't want to get
I
sidetracked.
mean,
But no
you're
ransom.
asking a lot. Why don't you just make your point?
Right, I am. Thank you. So, in terms of this word, now the reason why I'm going to reject your ad hoc translation, the one that you've just given this moment. Listen. Abdullah Yusuf Ali translated this. Abdullah Yusuf Ali works at a university in Saudi Arabia. He's a Saudi citizen. He is an Arab, and he was commissioned to do this translation. So I'm going to stick with this translation, not yours. What does it say in your translation?
It says ransom as well.
And there we have an independent secondary translation that also chooses the word ransom.
But then,
Wait.
So on a majority vote of 2-1, we should stick with the word ransom.
yeah, and then
No, it's not like
I
that.
just want to hear the point he's making.
Right.
But the thing is that he didn't mention
So-
Rather
so-
than argue
what we
about
say.
semantics.
So my
No, but
point
it's
is,
very important.
No.
it is
Please
important.
do.
You're absolutely
I wanna hear
right.
what-
So my point is, so I'm gonna come to a conclusion now.
Sure.
Okay, the Quran is using language unbefitting of Allah, because the word ransomed is clearly a transaction between two parties, and it is absolutely Muslims criticize Christianity because we say that the Son of the Father ransomed us through his atoning death. And you attack that and you say, why did God die to save us from God? But here we have an example where Allah is making a transaction that is proper to two parties, but it obviously can only be to himself. But that is logically irrational because Allah is one person. So there is a logical contradiction that a person feels that he needs to ransom something to himself.
But you see,
Because in authority, because he's Al-Maliki, he is not beholden to himself, he simply wills and it is.
Bob. You know what I've noticed with your argumentation, is that a lot of your argumentation lies.
Let me listen to his reply.
Lies onto depends a lot on linguistic understanding. So you would use a term like ransom.
Yeah. No, that's the Quran's
Yeah,
term.
I know. I mean, as in you would highlight the word ransom.
Yeah.
And then you would run through it, through what ransom means in the English language, and you trying to. Well, we have to. I understand, but you would do that, and then your argumentation rests upon linguistic, and then you bring theology into it.
Yes.
So, these things sometimes, because theologically speaking, oxum razor. If I was to make it the most simplistic way, explain this to my child, I would say to my child, God replaced Ismail or Isaac, depending on what you believe, with the ram.
Right.
That's literally what this story was all
Let's
about.
progress the argument further. Who's the sacrifice to?
What was the dream about?
Okay,
When a Muslim says that in Surah As-Saffat, verse 107, Allah simply replaced Ishmael with a ram, and that there's no need to enter into theological meaning like in Christianity, what they're really doing is avoiding the weight of the word the Qur'an itself uses. They try to simplify the event as a mere technical substitution, like someone preparing to do something and then changing their mind, saying, "Never mind, just replace it with this." But that's not the language the Qur'an uses. It doesn't say Allah replaced him using verbs like badala or istabdala. It uses the word fadainahu, we ransomed him. It's the same word used when someone offers fidya because they can't fast, or when prisoners are ransomed in battle. There's a clear theological structure. A person is facing consequences, a substitute is offered, and the penalty is lifted. That's not just a swap. That's redemption. So when Muslims say there's no need to get theological, they're actually trying to strip the theology out of a word that is, by nature, deeply theological. If Allah used fadainahu, then we have to ask, who made the demand? Who received the ransom? And why did it need to be paid at all, if Allah could simply cancel it? Now here's the deeper issue. If in Islam, Allah, who is one undivided person, demands a ransom and then offers it to himself, that makes him like someone playing two roles in one mind, talking to himself from two angles, without any ontological basis to do so. The idea that Allah ransoms to himself cannot be consistently explained in Islam because there is no personal distinction within his being. But in Christianity, precisely because God is triune, redemption is not only logical, it is relational and full of love. In the Qur'an, we see the image of redemption, but with no explanation. We're given the word, but not the recipient. The structure of justice is implied. But no one is named as the one receiving the substitute. So if Muslims want to reject Christian theology of redemption, they still need to explain why the Qur'an uses a term that inherently carries the very concept they deny. Because if ransom had no theological meaning, the Qur'an could have chosen a different word, but it didn't. It chose fadainahu, and there's no escaping the theology that comes with it. The Qur'an itself leads us there.
The reason why this is a rational contradiction, guys, is because can you think of an example where one person ransoms something to himself? It's illogical. It's irrational. Allah is one person. One second. Allah is one person.
I was rhetorical.
So Allah is one person. Now I'm going to be sparing. I'm going to be charitable. I'm not going to say that Allah is committing idolatry, that he's asking Abraham to ransom to some other third party. The only person that could possibly receive that ransom and sacrifice is Allah himself. But the idea of putting on God, who is a singular person in your religion, the idea of a ransom is a rational, logical contradiction, because one Maliki, the king, the all-sovereign, does not require ransoms for a thing. He simply says, doing it is. But the Quran, one second, the Quran is describing a ransom. Now, let me prosecute the argument a little further. Muslims attack Christian belief that Jesus Christ is our ransom. But in the Christian faith it makes sense, because the Son is ransoming to the Father. So one person is ransoming to another person. So when you criticize Christianity and say, how can God ransom himself? Why does God need to ransom someone through his Son? He's God, he can just declare your sins forgiven. Well, I now just flip that argument back on you and I say, why does Allah require a ransom for Abraham's son?
By the way, that's a very bad argument from the Muslims if they say something like that.
Which they do all the time, including Ali Dawah, including Mansour, including Shamsi. Well, Shamsi loves that argument.
So the only point I would make is that
when God looks upon those who have been redeemed through Christ, he no longer sees them as beings shackled by sin, for the deepest reality of their existence has been transformed. Redemption is not merely a legal act performed outside of man, it is a profound inner transformation. The Word, the eternal Son, has taken on human nature and made it his dwelling. In the body and blood of Christ, human nature, once ruled by death, by separation, by rebellion, has now been fully united with the divine life itself. Through the mystery of the Incarnation and the work of the cross, sin was not merely erased. Humanity itself was sanctified and glorified. So when God looks upon those who believe in Christ, he does not merely see objects of mercy, but new creations infused with his own light and life. What God sees is not just the result of forgiveness, but the reflection of himself. Because the Word, who is the radiance of his glory, now dwells within them. And this is why sin no longer defines them in his eyes. What lives in the believer is not just moral improvement, but the presence of the Word himself, the perfect revelation of who God is. When the Word takes up residence in the heart, the old self dies with him, and the new self rises, not by its own power, but by the life of the Son living within. God does not declare man righteous by seeing goodness in man himself, but by beholding his own Son within him, the Son who became flesh, who suffered death, who rose in glory, and now dwells in the spirit and body of his saints. Redemption does not mean that God turned away from his justice. It means justice was fulfilled through the union of Creator and creation. What was once mere dust has become a temple of glory. This is why he no longer sees man in his weakness or sin, because what he sees is the revelation of himself through the living Word. By grace, man has become the place where God recognizes his own image once more, not in the splendor of heaven, but in the redeemed body of man.